I like to describe myself, or at least I've been known to describe myself, as a professional listener, which I know makes me sound like, there I am there, in fact, professional listening right now. It makes me sound like a sort of second-rate therapist, but actually it is pretty much how I spend most of my time, whether that be listening to music in a kind of, I'm a musician, so I'm obviously constantly listening to music and producing work, or whether it be, in this particular circumstance you see here, which is actually field recording, in this particular case in the Amazon. And field recording is a practice that calls upon every ounce of your capacity as a listener. And the kind of work that I'm interested in is not about the kinds of things you might see in, say, a David Attenborough documentary, where it's about trying to objectively present that particular place or environment. What I'm interested in is going into these spaces and finding what it is that attracts me to them. As a listener, what is it that I'm trying to pierce through and discover in those places and environments? So, if we're going to think about listening, we need to probably put it into a little bit of a historical context. How is it that we've come to understand listening? And if we go back to the root of our ear, what our ear has done for us is it has meant that we have been able to persist as a species. Our ear is our best friend and we don't know it. If we think about our eyes, which are the predominant way in which we understand the world, it's a very visio-centric world we live in, and we've moved more and more towards that. Every moment of our day, our eyes are in constant use. If we think about what our eyes provide us, though, it's a very particular kind of frame of the world. It's linear. So right now, for you guys, your frame of reference basically stops with the projector behind me or my face or whatever it is that you're choosing to look at. If I look out the window here or out towards the back of the building, the termination point of my horizon of vision is, ironically, the ocean and the horizon. With our ears, though, it's not about that linear passage. Our ears are about a kind of omnipresent enveloping quality. Sound is all around us, and that's what it was useful for. When we used to sit around the campfire and we could, see just to the edge of the light, what our ears did was let us reach out into the black. And it let us know that if there was a pack of wolves coming to get us, we could get away in time. The fire did not provide that. It might have provided a little deterrent, but it did not give us the information that there was something else out there. So our ears have been incredibly important for us developing our capacity as a species. I think there's another dimension to it, though, and there's a delineation that needs to be understood between this idea of audition, this idea of hearing as a kind of sense, and listening, which I see as something very, very different. Hearing is more a kind of unconscious process. It's ongoing all the time, and it takes a certain kind of sonic event for our audition to become active, for us to focus on something. So if you're crossing a road and you hear a car coming towards you, it kicks in, and suddenly that fight or flight reflex is made active. Listening, though, is something quite different for me. It's more about almost a performance. You have an agency as a listener. You're choosing right now. The easiest example I can give you is, if I stop for just 1 second, suddenly a whole bunch of other small sounds come into your horizon of listening, whether it be the sound of the air conditioning, the monitors, the lights, whatever it is that you can hear the person rustling next to you. Right now, as I speak, you come back to focusing on my voice. You're choosing to extract my voice out of any number of possible listenings that are happening right now. But what is it we're actually listening to? It's important to kind of recognize that sound has a certain number of characteristics and features that occupy us. So if we think about human audition, generally we hear between 20 hertz, which is a very low sound, the sound of a car passing past, the motor, the resonating motor, or 20 kilohertz, a very high sound. But either side of those two frequency markers is sound that exists that we can't access with our ears. So below is this idea of infrasound, so it's very physical sound, 0.1 of a hertz. The waveform is 3.4 kilometers long. So, you're talking about the size of a tectonic plate moving. That's when you're going to experience possibly something like that. At the other end, 20 hertz, it's about 17 meters long. And then you go up to the ultrasonic, which starts at 20 kilohertz, where the waveforms are about 1.7 centimeters long. And they get much smaller, so small, in fact, that our ears can't possibly take them in. And in that area, you have things like bats and various kinds of dolphins using it for echolocation, and you also have us using it for things like radio broadcast and other kinds of data transmission. So I thought it would be useful just to kind of offer a bit of context to what I'm talking about, this idea of listening as it pertains to the work that I do. And I thought I'd actually give you a small presentation, if you like, of some of the recordings I've made. And to do that, I'd like to invite you to, in fact, close your eyes. As we know, it's always more romantic with our eyes closed. That's the first thing. Two, it reduces your visual activity. It means that you can be more focused on your audition, which is critical, I think, to do that every once in a while and remind yourself that you're not just your eyes. So I invite you again, please close your eyes. I recommend it, and I will perform something for you. Just to wake you from your slumber, I invite you to open your eyes again, or leave them shut. Either way is fine with me. So that was a whole range of sounds that I've recorded over the past decade from lots of different environments: Antarctica, the Amazon, parts of Australia, Japan. The first sound you heard was actually recorded with a hydrophone, an underwater microphone, and it was the sound of sand being swept by waves passing over the top of them. Then there was a small kind of crackling sound. That's actually the sound of the ionosphere, the top of the atmosphere, as electromagnetic charges are sent up from lightning strikes all across the globe. And towards the end there, that large sort of death metal band rehearsing in the jungle, that was actually the howler monkey, the Amazonian howler monkey, which is, of course, the loudest mammal on the face of the planet, calling it about 110 dB. So how is it that I came to kind of be interested in this idea of sharing these sounds? Well, partly it comes from an author called Peter Shendy, and in a book called Listening, he lays out two very simple, but for me very profound, provocations. The first is, can a listening be listened to? Can one make a listening listened to? And if you can you transmit that listening as unique as it is? And as simple as that sounds, it actually is basically the underpinning of what I'm trying to do with my life. I'm very interested in sharing with you the kinds of interests, preoccupations, the sort of politics of perception that I have, that each of us has. I'm looking to transmit that to you. But to do that transmission relies on a very important point of delineation, between what happens inside us and how we get that out, which is the mechanism of technology. So in those images before, there were a number of different kinds of microphones. I've talked about hydrophones, underwater microphones. Technology opens up the world of Audition for us. It opens up our capacity for listening in a way that we could never have imagined 160-something years ago when we first built a device that could transmit a sound beyond the moment of utterance. The phonograph, able to record and play back a sound. It was transformed the way that we think about sound. So if we get a device like this, for example, which is an electromagnetic pickup, and electromagnetic sound exists all the time, all around us, and with that sound, it doesn't travel through air like an atmosphere. It needs no medium to travel. That's why, for example, electromagnetic radiography of the stars can take place. There is no atmosphere in space, but it can travel without medium. If I turn this on, we will realize that there is all of this sound going on around us right now. So, for example, I'll just use my computer, something that everyone is using all the time. These are all the sounds that live inside your computer. Here's a good one. That is going all the time. In this room right now, there is an enormous 50 hertz drone, which is the power cycling through the building. In fact, I was just making some recordings a couple of weeks ago in a hotel on the Gold Coast, and I could hear the pulse of the building as I made these recordings. The electronic pulse of the building is incredible. But what this does for us is it does two things. One, it invites us to listen more deeply than we ever have before. We didn't even know these things existed up until quite recently. So now that we start to recognize that, well, it's important to recognize that actually as a species, we output a lot of this sound. These creations, this sound, it's of our making, and we do it en masse, whether it be boats at sea, planes in the air, cars, the insides of the buildings that supply our Wi-Fi, all of that is putting out enormous amounts of sonic energy that we have no capacity for accessing until now. So what technology does is it allows us to listen deeply. And that's important for two reasons. One, because it allows us to better recognize our own capacity as listeners, our own way to communicate with each other, to recognize ourselves in the world, a way of being in the world that isn't through our eyes. The other reason that it's important is that it allows us to recognize that as a species, we are outputting that information, that sound into the world, and it is affecting other bodies and things around us. And those will have an affect for us in the future. And it's up to us to begin to listen deeply as we can, and in some way begin to recognize that that sensing of the world gives us information and a future that potentially we might not have if we just keep that single fixed vision that we have. Thanks.